Hello, Senator Sanders. I'm Greg Stafford from Salem, New Hampshire, a longtime fan of your long career as an independent voice in Congress. I've been to 2 of your standing room only events here in New Hampshire and couldn't get near a microphone, so I'm making this video. We seem to be living in the movie Groundhog Day, where nothing seems to change very much. We keep electing people who promise change, but the only change we see is maybe things getting worse more slowly. My apologies to President Obama, who has to work around Congress if he wants to get anything done. But I think I see a way out of this box, legally and without bloodshed. Please check my thinking. Donald Trump and I both want to see America become great again. Beyond that, we differ. We can't get honest mainstream news about your campaign to all of the public, or much of anything else for that matter, because General Electric owns 78% of it. That's over 11,000 media companies in the United States. TV and radio stations, magazines, and newspapers sort of helps to make things a little more clear. There's no legitimate business reason for that, and it used to be against the law, because it's what you do if you want to blind the nation to what you and your rich pals have been doing. You can even gloss over the fact that some years ago now, Larry Silverstein admitted to having World Trade Center 7 demolished on 9/11/2001 at 5:20 p.m. Anyone, even an attorney general, can type Larry Silverstein admits into Google and have all the evidence anyone would need. No one can wire a 47-story building for demolition in a few hours, and certainly not once it's on fire. Neither can pull it mean they pulled it down with cables. That's something that they only do with buildings 5 or 6 stories high. If you watch the video of its demolition, it comes straight down in its own footprint, just like the first 2 towers. That's just to make my point about how badly we need to take this power away from these billionaires. All or nearly all companies in our industries have been bought by the same few hundred billionaires, funneling all wealth to themselves as categories of income that they had their puppets in Congress create, which goes practically untaxed. That alone is a national security nightmare at a time when they're driving us ever deeper into unsustainable debt every month, and as obvious a case of subversive activity as it can get. This is an obvious abuse of unchecked, unbalanced power, the very thing our Declaration of Independence declares we won't stand for. Therefore, we have no honest competition for our labor. Wage rates were set in a very few boardrooms 20 years ago, while their puppets in Congress keep driving the cost of living up, up, and up by printing more and more money to pay for bloated budgets that we don't need and we simply can't afford. Over $1 trillion a year. Right now, with a national debt over $18 trillion, the annual interest payments alone are more than the average annual budget during the Clinton years. Such debt not only threatens our entire global financial system, no one has expressed any plan for how we're ever going to pay this off. And it makes it impossible for us to afford to respond to threats abroad when necessary. which emboldens the bad actors on the world stage into aggressive actions they would never have attempted otherwise. Our billionaires have threatened publicly to move all of their money offshore if they don't get the business advantages that they want here. They've already sent millions of jobs offshore to take advantage of cheap slave labor, but still want to sell their goods here in America at American-level prices. As the economy gets worse and worse, they keep finding ways to lower wages still further, killing off even more consumers in a never-ending spiral. Many of them have stated that the American lifestyle needs to be degraded to be equal to that found in China for their trading purposes. Royalty would be preferable to these footloose people. Every time these traitorous people bought a company or merged two companies, many jobs were streamlined out as redundant. Well, there isn't any reason that we can't demand, with a citizens' initiative on the presidential ballot, allowing everyone a method to bypass our corrupted U.S. Congress. 24 states have this ability, this process. To demand two things: a return on New Year's Day 2017 to the IRS regulations in force during President Dwight D. Eisenhower's last quarter, which had the graduated tax rates in place that they had discovered necessary during the Great Depression to minimize the creation of billionaires as too unstable and powerful for any democracy. And second, that every company that owns another must sell it to its employees at 25% below market value by March 31st, 2017, or be fined $1 billion per day by the federal government. Starting with General Electric, the most destructive gang in this billionaire's cabal. We need all of our media companies to have separate owners in order to once again have honest news reporting and topical discussions, but also a true diversity of opinion. To make this possible, instead of the federal government helping the banks this time, it can help the public remove this nation-breaking power from our treasonous billionaires by financing those sales, the taxes on which can then be used immediately to pay off our debt. More separately owned companies will need more employees once again, and the wealth of the nation will no longer flow up to just a few hundred uncaring, greedy people. Having a vast majority of Americans become stakeholders in their own futures, and so many jobs available again, more jobs available again, in an environment where employers once again compete for our labor, will ease the fear of immigrants here in our nation of immigrants. And it will change the entire landscape of our country's future by unlocking so much personal opportunity. Now, in closing, I'd like to say this, and because a citizen's responsibility may feel differently these days than it used to, because we can step on a plane and be in another country in a matter of hours instead of months. But this, in my opinion, is the most important internal struggle that we've had since the Civil War, when half of the country was fighting with the other half of the country to decide whether we were going to be slave or free. of Gettysburg, there were over 50,000 casualties. It was near the end of the war, but they didn't know that then. They weren't sure. Everyone was weary of war. Both armies were not getting paid. They were living off of the land. And anyway, President Abraham Lincoln, a few months after that battle, and like I said, the war was still going on, went to Gettysburg and had this very short thing to say, which national leaders have been studying ever since to better understand our grand social experiment, which is what they called our new democracy. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who fought here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. It is rather for us, the living, to be dedicated here to the unfinished task, to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and their government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Thank you for listening. If you like the idea, it's my gift to you in your campaign, sir. Good luck. Feel the burn.